Hi, my name's Colin Stace. I'm a Senior Catchment Advisor with Hawke's Bay Regional Council. We're here today to talk about options for planting poplar and willow trees on seasonally dry sites. Our standard go-to for planting in hill country to control erosion is the poplar and willow pole. We use those for three reasons. First of all, we can establish them quite easily in the presence of livestock. A pole is just a great big 3 metre long cutting. We can put that in the ground a bit like a fence post and it will sprout and become a tree pretty quickly. They're quite a vigorous group of species, so they'll grow fast and produce big root systems, which is what we want for erosion control. And also they're deciduous species, so we don't get permanent shading under the trees, which would impact pasture growth. However, we can't plant poles just anywhere. On a situation like this, which is a steep north-westerly facing slope, these situations are quite dry in the middle of summer, and then we actually have trouble getting poles established because we're putting them in the ground as an unrooted piece of material. So we're here today to talk about another option, and that's called the rooted cutting. So here we are in one of our trials where we're comparing different establishment methods. Now beside me I have a light grade pole, a sheep pole, because this is a cattle excluded area, and this pole, as you can probably see, is quite dead. In fact, this pole didn't make it past Christmas. When the site dried off, the pole was dead pretty much straight away. But we do have other poplars here that are growing quite well, and that's because we've used this option here, which is called the rooted cutting. So in this case, this is a potted example. It's been grown in potting mix, but rooted cuttings also come as bare rooted stock as well. There's obviously a big difference in size between the two, and it's not as easy to establish plant stock of this size in the presence of grazing animals, so we need some form of tree protector if we're going to do that. So here today we're going to look at two examples of sheep only type protectors. These protectors aren't suitable for use with cattle, but if you exclude cattle from the planting area with a hot wire for a period of 4 to 5 years, you can use one of the other protector options to get this sort of material established and up to tree size before you can let cattle back into the planting site. So here's one of the options. This is the cage type protector, fairly basic. So we use a netting sleeve and then sections of drainage pipe to act as spreaders for that, and then we wire all that to a wooden post just using lacing wire twitched up at the back here, so one wire per spreader. In the first year we've gone from a tree of this grade up to a tree of this size here, and bear in mind that's on a dry northwesterly face where poles die. So this is the main advantage of using rooted cuttings. They're more resilient to dry sites. Even though they're not growing fast, they are still growing, and as they grow more roots and establish, their growth rate will pick up. Another tree protector option for sheep only grazing areas is the tube type protector, and they provide something of a mini glasshouse environment which actually enhances growth rate. So here we have a tree that started off about this size, and now it's nearly up to 2 metres. So installation of the tree shelter type protector is pretty straightforward. We just mount them on a 50 by 50 wooden stake, and I'll demonstrate that right now. Now on sites like this where we've got quite dry shallow soils, it's kind of hard to drive a stake in without a guide hole, so we make a guide hole first with a crowbar or similar device, so that makes it a bit easier for us to actually bang that stake in the ground. Now if you have one, it's good to have a maul or a wooden faced mallet for this job. Most of us have steel ones, but they're not the best thing for driving wooden stakes, but you just use what you have to use. But if you can get hold of a wooden faced mallet, that's the better tool for driving a stake in the ground. Now for demonstration purposes, I won't drive this all the way in the ground, but it's a 1.5 metre long stake, and you would probably want at least 300 to 400 of that in the ground so that you've got a good solid stake. Once the stake's in the ground, the next thing is to dig the hole. What we also do when we establish these trees is provide a little bit of weed control. So you can do that by spraying a knockdown herbicide like glyphosate, a residual herbicide as well to extend that control period, like tubethylazine, If you're using a residual herbicide, make sure you calibrate your gear and put it on at the right rate. And the other alternative is to use a weed mat. We dig our planting hole close to the stake, and the first thing we do is take off a slice of turf. So if you have used a residual herbicide, it's quite important to take that slice of turf off. Now we're going to put in a plug about that size, but we won't plant it forestry style. We'll actually dig the hole and loosen up that soil, so we're putting our plant into some cultivated soil. Now we've got some nice cultivated soil to plant into. You've got the option of using a trowel, or you could use a spade instead. Remember to put it close to the stake. That's because the protector needs to be around the tree, and if we put it too far out they won't line up very well. Now you don't need to do a lot of heel pressing, maybe just a press with the front of the foot, and then always rake a bit of loose soil, a bit of loose crumb over that area. It just helps to retain moisture. The next thing to do is put the protector on. So these protectors are quite easy to install, they just go on with zip ties. And there's a pair of holes down one side of the protector for that purpose. It's fairly soft, so pinch it together so the two holes line up, and then slip that through. And now it's just a simple matter of slipping that over the tree. And then twitching up the zip ties on the corner of the post. That way you'll be able to get them nice and tight. Just like that. It's not entirely necessary. These can be folded back and tucked in, or you can trim them off. I prefer to trim them off, it just makes everything tidier, and there's nothing for stock to start chewing on then. And that's it, tree planted, protector installed. So with these types of protectors, it's important to remember that they are sheep grazing only. Cattle have to be excluded, otherwise they will erect the protector and chew the tops of the trees when they come out of the protectors. So to exclude cattle, it's pretty straightforward. All we need is a single electric wire fence, and you can put one of those in using poly rods at about 4 to 5 metres, and then quarter round posts on the angles. So there we have the two protector types that you can use when planting rooted cuttings for hard sites where normal poles would struggle to survive. Where we can plant a pole, we will always plant a pole. It is the quickest and easiest way to get a tree established in the presence of grazing livestock. However, when we get onto these kind of sites which have shallow soils, northwest facing, very dry in the summer, there's not even enough soil there to plant a pole, then we have to look at other alternatives. So the rooted cutting poplar or willow is one of our first choices, and if the site gets really hard, we can go to other species as well, and we've got the protector types that will enable us to do that. So for more advice on tree planting in hill country for erosion control, talk to one of our catchment advisors. We have staff in Napier, Wairoa and in Waipawa. We can talk about the options including poles, rooted cuttings or other trees, just depending on the site type and the specific objective of the planting.